Hey guys, welcome back to the Results Junkies podcast. Paul and I are talking about the long tail on AI performance. There's some updates to how Google and Gemini are going to be weaving AI into the world of travel, and there are some very resourceful developers trying to find interesting ways to tell AI bots to stay off their websites. That's what we've got on the agenda for today. Mr. Singh, how the heck are you?
I'm good, man. Good. You know, we're getting into spring break season.
Yeah.
I'm having 99 kids. None of them overlap with each other. So,
Perfect.
yeah, it's great. So, going to be fun. Going down to the Turks next week for a
Nice.
couple days to chill out and really test the business model of all-inclusive places like beaches.
I love it.
My brother-in-law are going to test this out, so we'll see. But yeah, life is good. You know, there's always something going on with business, but life is good.
Good-ish. Yeah,
Yeah.
good-ish.
Yeah. Net positive. Net good.
Net positive. Okay, all right. Well, I'll take that. So let's start with this article about measuring AI ability to complete long tasks. I also have a factoid from the past week, or I guess a data point to share on AI. But effectively, I'll give a brief overview of this, and then want to hear your thoughts on it. It talks about the time frame of how long of a task AI can accomplish, if you will. And I think to some degree that there's obviously outer limits when it comes to things like chip capacity and bandwidth and all those things. This is, I think, sort of synthesizing all of those different elements and saying that over the past 6 months, or actually 7 months, the pace or the length of a task that the typical AI agent can handle has doubled in length. And so as you look through this chart that we'll add in the show notes, we're at the point now where some of the more sophisticated models can handle tasks that are upwards of an hour long. And you made the comment in pre-show about how you felt like this was a really good corollary to Moore's law.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting because you and I have been sort of talking about our various uses and stuff like that. And so when I stumbled across this article a couple of days ago, it just sort of caught my eye because it reminds me of Moore's law. It reminds me of how it wasn't that long ago. You and I would be walking through a Circuit City, and you'd be looking at like a Pentium 486 versus whatever the different names were back then.
Yeah.
It's funny because like now I've got this, I don't know what the latest iPhone is, 16 Pro, I think is what this is.
Mm-hmm.
And even when it lags for a millisecond, I get annoyed. I find myself getting annoyed. And then every once in a while, I have to remind myself that there was a time not so long ago where you would like click download on something and go to sleep. And hopefully it would download by the morning. Probably when we were all risking felonies, running Napster or whatever. So,
yeah.
But anyway, it's really interesting to watch here, right? Because we talked about the idea of like, AI. See, I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but and we're going to talk. I don't want to steal the thunder of the next thing we're going to talk about, but I'm at the point now where I'm using things like ChatGPT to just say like when I think about customer visits, right? I'm like, hey, what's the closest airport served by United Airlines to city state?
Yeah.
And it can figure it. But now I'm not ready to trust it to go like full end to end book the flight for me. But
Sure.
Just find me the closest airport. 9 times out of 10, it's been right. And then there was this one time where it gave me an airport that was close, but it turns out it was looking at summer routes as opposed to at the time winter routes. So it'll get better, right? But if you just look at that chart, you go from answer question to optimize code for custom chip. That's pretty fast. That's within, looks like 6 years, which by the way, I think is already happening. I think NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, I think said on maybe it was one of his like annual investor meetings or investor calls. He said something publicly that the reason their chip development had accelerated so quickly is that it's not just a team of humans that are designing the next generation chips, but rather a team of humans and like, I forget exactly what he said, but he said something like 1,000 bots that are running different permutations simultaneously. So just interesting to keep an eye. But the headline is interesting. The length of tasks AI can do is doubling every 7 months. So who knows? Maybe you and I will be irrelevant by the time I am 50, because you're probably already 50. But I am 50 in 6 years.
I'm definitely over 50 for sure. Definitely hit that milestone. And I would say to some degree we are irrelevant, or maybe less relevant than we were in the past. But when I think about AI, you're right. I keep thinking about the fact that you can tackle more with it. We talked about deep research a few weeks ago, where I tested it on some larger tasks. Hey, go back and scan through all of the results junkies episodes, stuff like that. And we
Yeah.
saw what I would call disjointed replies. And I think this gets back to, when I think about this in terms of like the the desire by developers to stretch out the length of tasks that these engines can handle. I still think there's another element here in terms of, probably the best way to say it, the showing your work part of it. Because to
Yeah.
your point, I've tried to focus on more basic tasks that I can hand to ChatGPT and have them answer for me. So, like, for example, you talked about airports, near XYZ city or state that United Airlines serves. I'm a big college basketball fan. I was working on some stuff for NCAA Survivor and bracket pools and stuff. And I asked ChatGPT after one of the slates of games from the first weekend of March Madness, hey, tell me all the teams that are left in the NCAA men's basketball 2025 tournament.
Yeah.
And I did this the morning after the first slate of games, I think, or maybe the second slate. So, there'd been, you know, 8, 12, 16, like there'd been a bunch of games. And what was interesting to me is that consistently, and I tried, a free version, and then I also tried the paid ChatGPT I have, and I got the same answer. It was able to give me an accurate answer for all the teams left except for one. The latest game in the evening, whoever was the last to play, didn't show up in the results. And so,
Yep.
but as you know, with these engines, it doesn't say information accurate as of 10:59 p.m. last night. I don't know if you'll remember this because you are younger than
That's right.
me, but there were times when I was a kid where you would read a newspaper story and it would say, this game finished past our publishing deadline. And so it just wasn't what it was. They would summarize the first half of a game or something like that. Or like, hey, the Bulls are going to play the Pistons tonight. And they would
Yeah.
acknowledge that they didn't have all the data because the game hadn't ended when somebody had to press the big red button and send the paper to print. And I
Yeah.
feel like we're missing that element because I knew there had to be 32 teams left because it was the round of 32. But ChatGPT just said, like, let me pull all this information together, and it gave me 31 teams. And so,
Well, yeah.
I still had to see the data, and because it didn't, like, if it just told me, hey, this is accurate through 10 o'clock last night, I would have known. But because there's not a robust show work feature, I'm still having trouble relying on the underlying tech.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, by the way. There was something here locally in Ashburn, and people have been on the show or listened to the show for a while know that you and I live pretty close to each other. So anyway, there was something in Ashburn here. Yeah, I forget what it was, but I was like looking something up. Anyway, I think it was like something new that was going to open up or something like that. So I like in my mind, the way I think about it is I typed in Google and I go to Google and I was like, okay, tell me about this thing opening in Ashburn. And all of a sudden it starts popping articles from like 5 years ago. I'm like, no, no, no. I know it's like in the last 6 months. So I go
Yeah,
to like
yeah.
advanced search and I change the time window
Hmm.
and I found it, right? It's funny you mentioned what you just did because I remember thinking, oh, I wonder if I could have just done that with ChatGPT. So I went over to ChatGPT and I said, what's the newest, location of X opening in Ashburn? And it didn't pull the latest one. So to your
Mm,
point, there
mm.
are some things where you do need to know, like anything that's like times, like any sort of indicator that allows you to kind of understand what the latest version would be kind of interesting.
Right,
Um,
right.
so
Especially
I'm
with
sure that'll
financial
get
news.
fixed.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
Yeah.
But I think like with financial news stuff like that, like which last 10Q are they using for a specific
Yeah.
company, like all that sort of stuff. Like I think
Yeah.
we need to get more robust bumpers around that
Yeah,
stuff.
I do think did I tell you that I'm paying for the $20 version of
You
ChatGPT
did,
now?
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and you
okay.
told the entire audience too.
Yeah, I'm still getting enough use out of it. Like I will say one thing I did find a lot of use in the last 7 days, for example, is I was using Looker Studio to set up some new dashboards with
Hmm.
some raw data that we have. And there were some like weird queries I couldn't figure out. And I found myself just kind of hitting up ChatGPT quite a bit. And there was one point where I actually exported the CSV because there was nothing confidential. This was just stats.
Yeah,
So I just like exported the CSV from Google spreadsheets, put it right into ChatGPT, and I'm like, hey, okay, here's what I want to do with this column and this column. And within a couple clarifications, I had to do a couple clarifications, to it. I got what I needed pretty quickly. So I think would have taken me maybe a full business day took an hour, maybe.
yeah. Yeah.
So that was worth $20. That
Oh
alone is
yeah.
probably worth $20. So
Yeah, I think like hourly rate, based on what your time is worth, you should be able to get $20 a month out of these tools. I think, being able to move them to that next level where they can have outsized effect for individuals, I think I'm still having trouble seeing it. In terms of like supercharging a developer, business model makes complete sense to me. If somebody
yeah,
can, and I'm making numbers up because I've never coded, if the average coder produces, 100 good lines of code a day, and an AI agent takes them from 100 lines a day to 130 lines a day. I mean, that's massive productivity gains for the
yeah,
company
that's right.
or for the coder.
That's right.
So
That's right.
especially
Speaking of,
especially
did you end
especially
up canceling your $200 plan?
yep, yeah. I downgraded to the 200 to the $20 plan.
Ah, nice.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
I
everybody,
look
Ed's got an extra $180 to burn. Let's go
right.
out.
Oh, see, yeah, there you go. Well, that's a good segue because we're going to talk about investing in companies. Little bit of housekeeping for folks who are tuning in. He is at Paul Sang on all those social media channels. I am at Pizza in Motion. The show is Results Junkies, and you can email us show@resultsjunkies.com. As we've talked about in the past, I am trying to invest in 10 travel startups a year for the next 5 years, running behind on that. So always looking for great companies in and around the travel space. So if you want to use that extra $180 a month that I have now that I've canceled my deep research subscription, let's put it to good use. And it ties in well with our next article about Google and the fact that they're rolling out vacation planning features to a bunch of their various tools. In this case, they're talking about search, maps, and to Gemini. And the interesting thing here, obviously, as you can imagine, Paul, I have a lot of thoughts on this. At a high level, I'd say a lot of people are doing this now. I get pitched quite a bit on people who are like, "Hey, here's my AI agent assisted vacation planner. So tell it where you want to go. It'll spit out an itinerary for you, and we're going to charge whatever $10 a month to folks." I see a bunch of these sorts of models where they're using AI to do this sort of stuff. And what Google is talking about doing is two things. One that I do consider to be AI, and one that I consider more machine learning. But these are what I would call the interesting points. So in the whole search and maps feature, it talks about you being able to turn to Google Gemini, for example, and say, plan me a trip to Costa Rica about nature, is one of the examples that the article uses. I think that's a very valuable tool. What's probably more interesting to me, which I think is more machine learning, is that you're very familiar with Google Flights, I know. They're talking about enhancing their hotels product, which is nowhere near as elegant as the flights product. But essentially what they want to start doing is start tracking hotel prices. So, if you need to go from, Dulles to wherever you guys land in Turks and Caicos. You guys land in St. John, or where do you land?
Turks is Providenciales.
Yeah, okay. So yeah,
Providence.
so you
Yep.
throw that route in and say, hey, let me know anytime that route goes below, $500 or whatever. So same thing here with hotels they're rolling out. So I do have some other thoughts on Google and travel in general, but I want to stop there and get your thoughts on how you feel about this AI integration into their core products as it relates to travel.
One of the things you said there, I think is so important, is you said there's a lot of people doing this now, and there's a lot of truth to that. A lot of people have just, given how interesting AI has become, and given how interesting and maybe even accessible it's become to create your own agents on existing models. We're seeing a flood of these things. Now, the reality is, as you know, you kind of have to go through that exercise to figure out then which of these will actually turn into businesses and provide enough value.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things I think a lot about, though, is I wonder if the real interest. Let me say this a different way. When we look back maybe 15, 20 years ago, when new database types were like getting really sexy, there was like MySQL, then there were graph databases, and there were all these things, and people tried to create these like companies around it, and they kept talking about the technology. The truth is, like, now that it's all settled, the dust is all settled years later, you and I have no idea like what database StreamYard is using. For all
Right.
I know, it's MySQL or it's Oracle or whatever. So where I'm going with this is like, what was that company? I don't know if we can mention the name here. Maybe you can, but it was a company a couple of years ago that you and I talked to, and they would basically help you with I know it's not PointsPath. It's the other guy. I
Point
still
me.
get investor updates from Point Me.
Point.
Point
Yeah.
Me.
Yep.
If I remember Point Me, essentially the idea was like, they've got systems, but also people that help you maximize the way
Mhm.
your points work.
Yeah.
I can't help but wonder if like eventually the most interesting applications of AI agents are going to be when people like me, the end user, don't even know that AI is involved. They'll just say, "Hey, Paul, this is Jane, and Jane's going to help you." And if I call back, they'll be like, "Hey, this is Billy, and Billy's going to help you." And the point is that like I don't know, and maybe I'm just a data set of one or data point of one, but or sample size of one, but like, okay, I feel weird admitting this to you because I feel like you're gonna yell at me. When we go to Disney, we just there's somebody that somehow Dana has known for years that does like she's like a travel agent for like Disney and everything else, right? And when I go to like something low stakes like St. John, where it's just me and Dana, we're just gonna go like hang out and do nothing.
Yeah.
I'll just book my own flight, get my own thing. I don't really care, right?
Yeah.
But when I go to Disney and there's things that could go wrong, or like when we're going to the Turks next week and things could go wrong, I just text Kim. And like I know she's a human,
Right.
and I know that she knows when my birthday is, she knows when Kim knows when Dana's birthday is. And so when things are going well, there's like little nice surprises she'll just throw in there, like, "Hey, here's some extra flowers," or "Hey, Dana, I booked a
Yeah.
massage for you." She knows us, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I wonder if like eventually people will interact with it. Like I just think more people will interact with like a humanoid element of this. So I'm not articulating this very well, but it's interesting. When I read this article, I'm like, gosh, none of this sounds interesting to me. The idea of like AI putting a trip together for me, like, no, no, thank you.
Yeah.
But, there
Yeah.
was one part of this article that I thought was really interesting where it said, you can automatically identify places mentioned in your screenshots
Hmm.
and then show you a map. That's kind of cool because,
Yeah.
like, go to Paris. Well, I have
Mhm.
pictures maybe of places I might want to go. Have no idea how to get between them.
Right.
I wouldn't mind somebody, putting this in and saying, "Give me the optimal walking path" or something like that to go
Well, and
see all
even to your
this. That
point,
that
just a
could be cool.
discovery element that says, like, well, you and Dana got married, on the rooftop balcony at the Shangri-La, and like being able
That's right.
to say, like, well, like, yeah, hey, break this picture down and tell me where it occurred. So I do think there's a pretty critical element there that AI can lend to all these things. I think the other thing you sort of hinted on, which I think is something that I've sort of wished Google had gotten into more sooner, is this
Yep.
concept of what can you accomplish in a certain period of time. So as you're building an itinerary, Google should know things like traffic. It should know that the number of
Yeah.
times a flight is delayed. It should be able to know to some degree when tickets sell out for certain things.
Yeah.
There's different pieces it can put together. And I think one of the things I've I won't say always, but for quite some time, one of the things I've been disappointed about when it comes to Google, and I'm gonna get nerdy for here for a second, but a number of years ago they bought a technology called ITA Matrix.
Right.
And so for folks that are listening who don't know what ITA Matrix is, ITA Matrix powered a lot of very interesting features and still does for a lot of the popular online travel agencies. And they do things like if you've ever been on one of these sites and you say, well, I live in Dulles, and it says, show me flights from nearby airports. Well, ITA Matrix built this model where you could, the most typical travel agencies say, show me within 25 miles. ITA Matrix said you could do 500 miles, you could do 1,000 miles, you could do whatever you wanted, and it'll build itineraries any way you want. It's just aggregating a massive amount of data, and then showing it to you in whatever way you want to allow you to slice and dice it. And so when they bought ITA Matrix, I think a lot of us were excited because we thought, well, they're going to fold all of that functionality into Google Flights. And I'll be able to do the sorts of things I used to do in ITA Matrix with weird codes and stuff like that you had to know. But they would simplify it and they would make it part of the rule set. Well, they
Yeah.
never really
Yeah.
did that. And so to your point on like this next phase of, can they tell me like once I see the picture of something, can they tell me how to get there? Can they tell me how much time I'm supposed to spend at each spot and like help you construct the itinerary? Or
Yeah.
more to the point of something that you said, I don't know if it was last week, but recently in one of the episodes you talked about using ChatGPT to tell you whether the timing of the board meeting you were planning was
Yeah.
achievable. And it said like, hey, you need more transit time between this activity and this activity. I think
Yep.
when you talk about now trying to stitch together, Google knows the operating hours of an
Yeah.
organization. It knows how far it is. It knows the relative traffic. Like it should be able to tell you whether you can do the Grata Familia in Barcelona and still make it to Los Ramblas before they
Yeah.
stop serving coffee at Cafe Zurich. Like it should be able
y-
to to stitch those things together.
Yeah.
And to your point about Kim, I think Like this is this crossover. Like I see a lot of companies in the startup space trying to figure this widget out, because the reason why you go to Kim is because she's a subject matter expert. She
Yeah.
knows that Disney changed the policy for lightning lanes a month ago, and she knows how to achieve the best result out of the new lightning lane policy. The tool that you're buying, you don't have that comfort level with the tool yet. And so
Yeah.
I'll leave this anonymous for a second, but you talked about Point Me. There are other competing services out there. And one of the things, I was having a discussion with somebody that I trust a lot in this space. We're having this discussion last night about how there are other tools that have what's called phantom inventory, meaning it shows you an award flight. It doesn't really
Yep.
exist because it was
Yep.
cached data from a day ago or a week ago, and the information has just changed since then. And so you don't know the accuracy of the data. And so this is this bridge. You go to Kim because you trust Kim to give you boots on the ground data today, and you'll use AI Kim when you're comfortable enough that AI Kim can give you a boots on the ground 360 view.
We're going to find out real quick if Kim listens to this podcast or not. Because
Because she won't plan
Kim,
your next trip. She's like, "You're putting me out of business, Paul."
she's probably going to downgrade one of my rooms just to piss me off now.
Yeah, I might
But
call her and tell her to.
so look, here's the thing. First of all, I think what we're talking about, just given what we talked about a few minutes ago in terms of how quickly AI can do longer tasks or improves at longer tasks, seems like in the next 2 to 3 years, we'll probably get close to what we're talking about.
Sure,
Seems like. I'm just guessing
sure,
here, right?
right.
Okay, so now let's go. So I painted this picture a few minutes ago of, the reason I use or I ask for Kim's help on what I call high stakes trips, anything
Hmm.
where I've got my kids in tow and, it's all about the experience. I really just like having a human that, to your point, knows that lightning lanes changed recently or
Right.
knows, that the jerk shack is right outside of the beach's property. It's not going to be advertised, but you really should just walk across the street and get something from there, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome until it's not. So I'll give you an example. This is the part where Kim might get mad at me. She's a human. She's got a family. She's
Hmm.
got other stuff going on.
Yeah.
I texted her 2 days ago about something I'd like to surprise Dana with next week. No response. And
Oh.
that's where I think this is where, and I know she's busy, right? She'll probably respond to me here on the weekend or something. But the point is, this is where these sort of AI powered situations are going to be really, really able to do some interesting things because they kind of don't sleep. They just,
Right.
so once you achieve, let's call it information parity with a human, then that's when the game really changes because now you can trust this thing to know all the context and be available 24/7. And that's going to get really, really fascinating.
Yeah, and
So,
I think there's a crossover here, just like there is for developers who are using AI agents to help them increase the level of code. Because the example for Kim is your subject matter expert on lightning lanes and which are the best restaurants at Disney and how hard it is to get to this place and that place. But to your point, at some point, I think smart versions of Kim will say, "I've got this AI bot, and when I'm not here, it's not too dissimilar to a website." And it'll be
yeah,
like, "Hey, here, hey, you've reached Kim AI. Here are the things that Kim can answer for you. Kim can request an amenity in your hotel room. Kim can
yeah,
request a late checkout. Kim
yeah,
can, order you an Uber, like things that have
yeah,
APIs that it can plug into that Kim could
yep,
do if she was awake or her kid
yep,
wasn't sick or whatever.
yep,
But
yep,
I
yep,
think that's the next version for a lot of folks to be able to do two things. First off, obviously to be able to provide more services to their customer, but like as you well know, like we all have the same number of hours in the
yeah,
day. And so if Kim
yeah,
is able to take 20% of what she provides to clients and automate it at a rate that is at or close to the same
yeah,
accuracy rate she has, she can take
yeah.
on more clients and she can make more money.
We were talking about this internally. I was talking about this with my CTO the other day. We have gotten, and I'm sure other people listening to this that run businesses have gotten this too. We've gotten a lot of cold emails lately. Probably, I don't know. I feel like it picked up quite a bit 4 months ago. We're getting a lot of like cold email from vendors that are like, "Hey, you can hire us to, we're essentially consultants that will come in and find places to implement AI into your business or whatever." Like,
Yeah.
so I was like, "Hey, let's just go explore this." Nothing crazy. Like, "Hey, just hit reply, ask for pricing or whatever." And
Right.
of course, all these guys come back, and we don't know who these companies are. And this is just one email, but they'll be like, or one response back. They'll be like, oh yeah, it's just an engagement of 100K annually and we'll solve it, And so it's like, oh,
Just,
only.
just
Okay, got
only,
it.
only.
And I was talking to, I think I said to Brett, I said, hey, I think for, as much as it's exciting to talk about what we're talking about, right? Like, hey, imagine in 2 or 3 years when AI Kim's available 24/7. As much as it's fun to talk about, I still think from a practical standpoint, at least from a business standpoint, but maybe even from a personal standpoint, the best applications of AI today still is really like on the fringe of what you're doing. So like, for example, when I was doing that Looker Studio thing, my options were go ask somebody else in the team and distract them from other work and hope they can do it for me. Option two, I guess, is, you know, stay up super late one night and Google and figure it out. And option three was to just ask low stakes questions. Hey, here's the CSV. Here's what I want to display. What is
Yeah,
the, the dynamic formula to get what I want or whatever. And I think like, so what I said to him was like, hey, if that's what it's going to cost to bring in these people, I'd almost rather just hire an engineer, maybe a junior engineer that is tinkering with AI and give them discrete problems. Like,
yeah,
hey, here's what a human can do. So like to say this bluntly or more articulately, I know my engineers are already using AI tools to optimize queries and things like that. So we
sure.
we did have
Yeah,
to approve access to like Gemini AI and stuff like that inside of our secure areas to do that. But my non-engineering teams are not using that yet. And when I say non-engineering, I actually mean like specific healthcare specific roles that make up, I think, 28 of my 61 roles right now
yeah,
are not using it. So like, hey, here's this claim that came back and our technology couldn't figure it out. Could we actually maybe give them a hint on what went wrong? I don't know. That could be an interesting thing. Say how do we make it so that a rejection that comes back that requires human review goes from n minutes to 10% less. I don't
yeah,
know. That could be interesting. So it's on the
yeah.
fringes, I think. But then on the other extreme, we got guys like friends like Matt Paulson who probably knows way more about this and is profiting to the tunes of millions of dollars a year, probably millions of dollars per minute at this point, pumping out content and making a ton of money. So you and I are the idiots for sure.
Oh, well, that's a good note to pivot to our last article. We're going to talk about how open source developers are fighting AI crawlers, and we've talked a bunch on the show about AI and crawling data and some of the lawsuits between, say, like the New York Times and ChatGPT and other sorts of large media organizations. But these are real issues, and I think the article brings up a bunch of interesting points. The two that I'll focus on are one, just sort of like the breadth of the problem. So there's a quote in the article here about Kevin Fenzi, sysadmin of the Linux Fedora project, said that the AI scraper bots had gotten so aggressive that they had to block the entire country of Brazil from access to the database. That's like when we think about that for just a second, I mean that's a pretty big statement. There's whatever 200 million people living in Brazil, and none of them have access to the project based on what they had to do just to make sure that their servers didn't fall over. And so they're talking about ways to prevent this. And so obviously blocking IP ranges is one of the ways to do that. I think what the article talks about that I thought was interesting, especially when we talk about bots that are learning. If we think about the logic here, if a bot crawls a site and learns later that the information it got from the site was wrong, in theory, it might score that site lower in the future. And so there is this concept in the article of instead of giving zero value to the bot, a developer suggested giving negative utility value. And the examples they used were, what if you fed the AI bot a bucket load of articles on the benefits of drinking bleach, or articles about the positive effects of catching measles on performance in bed? And so, at some point, the AI bot would know it got bad information and would start to reduce the score of that website based on these fake pages that they had created to fool the
Yeah.
bots.
This is, I find this interesting because like, okay, so this is kind of like startup investing. When normally I'm sure you've experienced this, Ed, like you go to a investor conference and if you ever want to like really, get 11 opinions on, from 10 different people, just ask them what they think about high valuation. Hey,
Right.
you just ask the question of, hey, how do you feel about investing in high valued companies,
Yeah.
whatever. In summary though, here's the thing. you only have I always tell people, in my opinion, you only have three choices when you deal with something that you think is valued higher than what it should be. Option one is just walk away. That's cool. Just know that you don't even get a chance to play.
Yeah.
Option two is try to reason with them, which may or may not work, but
I've tried
reality
that with
is
you. Yeah, I've tried that with you.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Reality is like you're just going to look like a jerk, and probably worse. Even worse, you may even like accidentally send the wrong message, and now that founder's telling other founders about you being a jerk and whatever. I find that there is a third option that I've tried to use more often over the years. Is that you know maybe it's not the high valuation that I'm worried about. Maybe it's actually the result, or it's the concerns that come with high valuation. So hey, if like I always just say to simplify it, I'm like, hey, look, if let's just say your starting valuation is 10 million, I'm just going to make that up.
Yeah.
Rather than reason you down to 3 million, because maybe that's what I think other companies in your category or stage are worth, maybe what I say is like, look, I think you're overvalued. And what I'm really worried about here is that like you're going to get acqui-hired. Now, if you fail, none of the initial valuation matters. If you crush it, really crush it, the initial valuation really doesn't matter. It's really that weird limbo state in the middle where,
Yeah.
we got some traction. Now I'm just going to get an acqui-hire for like 4 million. That sucks. And so, one of the ways that I remember we handled this in the 500 documents, and you can kind of still see this, it's still public open source documents, is that for our convertible debt, anywhere where, if there was an acqui-hire, basically if there was a change of control at basically that would not return 2x the capital before the equity converted to equity, we get a veto right.
Right.
And I would just say to people like, hey, I'm not, I'm just not a bank. And think about it. And I would say to them, like, think about it this way. In the scenario where you grow big and you get a next round and you convert to equity, this clause goes away. It disappears. It says it right there in the
Right.
paperwork. And in the scenario where you fail, this is a convertible debt document. I lose my money and this clause means nothing. But let's just say you end up in the middle. You end up kind of not, you're walking dead kind of thing. And now you're in this weird pickle because you kind of got to like be able to negotiate with a buyer, but maybe they don't want to, they know you're like, DOA and they can hardball you. Now, at least it gives you the option to bring me to the table as an investor or bring all your investors to the table and say, hey, we can waive this veto right, but why?
Yeah.
And so anyway, I'm rambling here a little bit, but now we come back to this. I think this is, I get why people are playing these games to block it. I get it, right? And you and I have talked at length across multiple episodes about, there still not being clear legislation or regulation around
Right.
what's in the model. Like nobody knows that, right? So I get why people are trying to block it, but I think the same logic applies here. You kind of have three options. One is you don't want your data in there, so just do stuff like this, I guess. And you lose the ability maybe in some cases to even have your data and your source listed in there. Option two is that you try to reason with these people, but you probably spend a lot of money, a lot of time and, whatever. And like you say absurd things, like at the bottom of this article, it says, please stop legitimizing LLMs or AI image generators or GitHub code. Like, okay, what you achieve nothing by saying that. You just, whatever. Or option three is you try to find some middle ground. I don't know what that middle ground is, but the point is like, I think people are taking we've actually wrestled with this at Strata internally. And my position has been like, look, I hate the idea that so we publicize all of our data. We publicize all the aggregate data so you can like see what CPT codes get paid at in different states. And that's all based on real payment data.
Mm-hmm.
And I've struggled with this because like for 2 or 3 years, we've been wondering, like, should we do stuff like this? We've tested Anubis. I've tested that on our site. I chose to not do it. I chose to like leave it open. And my argument to the team was like, look, guys, if we do this, the reality is we lose any option to be part of we lose the ability to gain any of the traffic because somewhere out there, some medical professional is going to go to ChatGPT and say, what am I supposed to get paid for in Kentucky for this CPT code combination? I'd rather have a fighting chance to be in that conversation because my data got indexed rather than the opposite. And time will tell if that's the right solution, but it does look like it worked. I mean, I think we are getting somewhere between like maybe and I know the data. I have the data. I just don't know it off the top of my head. But I would say we get probably 2 to 4 really good sales qualified leads per month that have a last click attribution of ChatGPT. And that's for an interesting B2B software like us that is not something that the average person thinks about every day. So,
Yeah.
maybe take that for whatever it's worth, right? Is that like for specific situations like us, maybe it's different than situations like New York Times, or live sports like you brought up earlier. Maybe that's a different thing. Maybe ESPN is right to potentially use one of these blockers so that live scores are not included in ChatGPT.
Yeah, maybe.
Whatever. But in specialized scenarios like ours, maybe it is better actually to just let them crawl and see what happens. I don't know. Could be famous last words, and this episode will be replayed when I get sued for driving the company into the ground.
There you go.
For not blocking our website.
Boy, if there was ever a place to pin it for this week, right there. Paul getting sued for driving the company into the ground.
Oh man.
Well,
I hope that doesn't make it into the cold intro.
Yeah, good luck with that.
I'm gonna get skewered by the board next week. We'll see.
Well, the good news is you'll be in Turks and Caicos, so you'll be able to drink your problems away.
That's right. I'm gonna test the business model of beaches. We'll see how it goes.
Awesome. Well, I hope you guys have a great trip.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear about it. We'll live vicariously through you for a week.
I love it. You going anywhere fun next week?
No, not even close.
No mileage runs to Vegas?
No, I think I'm actually not on airplanes next week, if you can believe that. It's kind of weird. I know.
All right.
I know.
You're feeling okay.
Yeah, right? I could use it. Yeah, my Aura Ring is screaming profanities at me on a daily basis, so.
I love it, man. All right, well, have a great week. I will have a drink or two for you.
Safe travels.